Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Dychronic, your host here on this Destiny 2 video, and today we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 PvE heavies in Destiny 2. And as always, this list is completely subjective based on my own opinion, so obviously you're going to have your own weapons that you like using more, so please let me know in the comments down below what those weapons are, and of course tell me why, because if you don't tell me why, I'm not going to know. Feel like that's pretty obvious, huh? And throughout the video, you'll be seeing this amazing dark theme color-coded linked out DPS calculation spreadsheet, and if you wanted to get your hands on it, is a fully public spreadsheet for you guys to use. All you have to do is head over to my Discord server, which can be found in the description down below, and in the server there's gonna be a channel called #D2 Spreadsheets, and in that channel you'll be finding links to my spreadsheets. On top of that, in that Discord, you can find extra notifications for my videos and my Twitch streams. You can find community game nights, events that we have. Sometimes I do extra giveaways there, so stay tuned on that Discord. And there's one last thing I want to say before I get into the video, and this is actually quite important, is the discrepancies between my numbers and the numbers that other people have found. Firstly, I do my testing on the first boss of the Last Wish raid on Kali. Now this is a raid boss and I use her for a number of different reasons. First of all, she's 750 power, so pretty much no matter what I have, there's never going to be a difference in power advantage because they're all pretty much negligible. Secondly, she's a raid boss, which is data that's actually a useful metric as compared to other raid bosses. Third, there's a rally flag, so if I ever need ammo, it's right there. Fourth, she's a very distinct crit location. Fifth, she spawns pretty much right off the bat, so it's very easy for me to get to. There's a whole bunch of reasons why I use Kali. However, Kali is known to have a lot of explosion damage resistance. Now this actually varies vastly between different weapons. Grenade launchers I've seen anywhere from like 20 to 50% more damage against Greg as opposed to Kali. For rocket launchers, things actually go anywhere from 10 to 80%, and of course for Xenophage, things change a lot. Now, if you've seen a video by Dado from a few weeks ago where he measured a lot of what is the best DPS weapons these days, especially considering Izanagi is out, what is the best? And he did things like Wendigo, Thousand Voices, Xenophage, Whisper. He tested a whole bunch of ones that were near the top, and his Xenophage was doing 25,000 damage to the Guard of Salvation boss, whereas his Whisper with Whispered Breathing was doing 30,000. Now, my Whisper also does 30,000, but my Xenophage does 8,000. So there's a huge discrepancy in certain weapons and smaller, big discrepancies in other weapons. So in the end, what I'm trying to say is that I have done tests for hundreds of weapons, for the reload speed, to the magazine and reserve size, to measuring all the different perk changes for Full Court versus Swashbuckler and Rampage, and all the extra positive damage modifiers, and measuring all these different things, and I cannot just change that all over to something else. That is an extremely vast and arduous task. Just keep in mind these variables and these discrepancies when you look at this spreadsheet, and just keep that in mind and then just apply it to the wild. Moving on to the main content of the video, talking about the actual spreadsheet. If you've never seen one of my top 10s before, I don't just talk about the 10 best weapons in my opinion. I talk about all of the weapons that I considered, all of the different archetypes in big bulks, talking about the rocket launchers, the grenade launchers, how they fit in the meta, why they are in the places they are. We're talking about the general ideas, and then we'll talk about the top 10 as well. On top of that, if you've never seen my spreadsheets before, I have a lot of resources here. First of all, you can see where you can get each one of them. If there's a special exotic quest or ritual quest, I have these all links here to different guides. If you want to know the best perks for different weapons, if you get a weapon, you want to know if it's a good version of that weapon, it's all listed here. On top of that, all of the different catalysts are also listed here. So if you want to know how to get a certain catalyst, what it does, how to complete it, everything is listed here. So you don't have to go to 20 different websites. I have all of the exotics listed in this countdown in this spreadsheet, and we'll always have all of the exotics to be able to have these catalysts listed, and I have them for primary, for special, and for heavies. And of course, the best part, the part that you all know and love, the DPS calculations. If you wanted to know how much damage something does, how long it takes to reload, the adjusted RPM, there's lots of fun little calculations here. For a lot of different reasons, with a lot of different notes that are all listed here, all nerdy and mathy, and took a very long time to do. this is an incredible resource. Obviously created by one person, so some of the numbers are just going to be a little bit weird. Anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the different weapons. We're going to talk about the general category, starting from the bottom, the worst weapons in my opinion for DPS, and working our way upwards, and also talking about the top 10 along the way. First and foremost, for the rocket launchers. Firstly, rocket launchers have a huge blast radius, so obviously they cannot do a lot of DPS, and on top of that, they don't do a lot of full ammo damage either. Now this makes sense. They're easy to use, and they have a big blast radius. As far as game philosophy goes, this is where they belong. On top of that, they take a long time to reload. Every single shot you have to reload, and that tanks the DPS a lot. Now there are a few exceptions here. First of all, the Deathbringer, giving you more damage the farther they explode and travel. And of course, secondly, the Truth, which only has to reload once, giving it a pretty respectable DPS, but a pretty poor full ammo damage still. So in general, as far as PvE goes, rockets are not the answer. And while I'm here, just wanted to mention these bottom exotics. Anarchy has always done very poor damage, so if you've ever heard somebody say, hey, a Mountaintop was Anarchy, that was from a time in the past where Mountaintop was doing all the work and Anarchy was just helping. A lot of these are utility items to be used in very specific scenarios. Wardcliff sometimes having a ridiculous DPS, sometimes having a very poor DPS, and again, explosions don't do that much on Collies, so it could be that this number is kind of fudged. Next up, let's talk about heavy machine guns. Now, heavy machine guns, very similarly to rockets, are very easy to use, but from the other side of the spectrum. You can very precisely shoot people in the head, shoot fodder enemies, shoot elite enemies. You don't have to use a sixth of your ammo on a single enemy, even if it's like a thrall enemy. You can be very precise, and it's basically like a high-powered auto rifle. So it's easy to use, so it cannot really do that much damage. Now, there are a few exceptions. Namely, first of all, Xenophage, having a very high DPS against certain things like the Garden of Salvation boss, for example, and there's another one up here, the Thunderlord, which actually increases its RPM as it begins to fire, which is something that's very important and very impactful. On top of that, it summons lightning from above, which is extra damage on top of that, which doesn't do that much, by the way, but it still helps. Next up, let's talk about grenade launchers. Now, there have been a bunch of different personalities on the internet that have talked about grenade launchers being the meta for DPS. I think Dado said it in that video that I mentioned from before, that Wendigo is still an extremely powerful DPS option, and I actually do have the highest and the best version of Wendigo listed in a very respectable position at 17,000 DPS, a decent amount of full ammo damage. Obviously this number will go up depending on the enemy that you shoot, but for the most part, grenade launchers, similarly to rockets, have AoE, so they're not allowed to do that much, and it makes sense that they would be lesser than that of a single shot sniper rifle like Whisper. There are a lot of different things you can do for grenade launchers to make them better. For the most part, things like spike grenades make them do more damage for the hit. Things like full court or swashbuckle or rampage, these things can increase your damage. If it's a 120 RPM versus a 150 RPM, that'll often make it do more damage. And honestly, the best legendary grenade launcher outside of the Wendigo is going to be Love and Death, because it can have full court plus spike grenades, and I think you can also get field prep in there, which is something that's really nice to have. But yeah, I can get field prep, alright. If you didn't know, field prep increases your reserves, which means you can do more total ammo damage. Next up, we have a bit of a weird ones with swords. Now, swords have kind of always been all over the place. You can see the DPS ranges from 10,000, the full ammo from 400,000, all the way at the top, we have 21,000 and 1 million total ammo damage. Swords have always been all over the place, but now they've changed in slight ways, and I know a lot of you guys are wondering, what's the best way to use a sword? So firstly, there are 3 distinct ways that you can use a sword. First of all, just regular light attacks. Don't care about the perks, just doing light attacks and giving you a pretty poor DPS and a decent full ammo damage. The second way to do it is something that I call Light Plus, and what Light Plus is using Relentless Strike and Whirlwind Blade perks on your sword, which I consider to be the best, hands down, no matter what, best perks for a sword if you want to do DPS and PvE. If you did not know, Relentless Strike basically means every 3rd hit with your light attack hits will give you an ammo back to your sword, and Whirlwind Blade, up to 5 stacks, will increase your damage by doing light attacks. So in essence, if you just continue to light attack the entire time, which is what Light Plus is, you can get a pretty insane amount of damage and pretty good DPS as well. And the final way you use a sword is with a heavy attack mixed in with all of the different light attacks. If you did not know, swords have changed slightly. You can't just continually heavy attack over and over again. Because of the way the new energy system works, you have to use a heavy attack and wait for that energy to recharge, and between each heavy attack you do a bunch of different light attacks. So if you take a look at the math inside of the Death's Razor heavy attack, which is the adaptive frame sword, this first number here is going to be the heavy attack. For some reason it's a light attack plus 4 times this number, and then of course you can do 8 light attacks between each heavy attack, and that's one circuit. You just repeat that around, divide that by 12 because you use 12 ammo, stuff like that, and then do all the calculations. It was kind of a headache because this number is actually going to be the full whirlwind times 5 bonus with the relentless ammo that's coming back into the total ammo, doing weird let me tell you, it was not a fun time doing all these calculations, but I believe they're correct. Let me know if they're wrong. And from what I found out, in general, the Light Plus version is gonna still be your best bet for DPS and full ammo damage. The exception here being the Gold Tusk, one of the only lightweight swords that can only be used by hunters because of the fact that its swing speed is a lot faster. It does some weird stuff with the heavies because the heavy attack is very fast. Ooh, but hold on a second. I just realized something. You use your full ammo in 35 seconds here, but you use your full ammo in 53 seconds here. And that's actually quite important as well. And finally, the final main section is going to be the linear fusion rifles. Obviously, we have a couple exotic sniper rifles in there and the shotgun, but those aren't categories. The final one is going to be the linear fusion rifles, and honestly, one of the most underrated heavies in the entire game. They have some pretty great DPS, the worst DPS you can possibly get at 14,000 and 600,000 full ammo damage, and at the top end at 24,000 for a freaking legendary. So let's talk about the linear fusion rifles and the best ways to have them. First and foremost, box breathing. You have to wait a couple seconds before you get a 25% damage bonus, so you can increase the full ammo damage, but that also tanks your DPS. Secondly, the regular version, just firing normally without any damage bonus, up to 18 to 19,000 DPS, which is something that's actually pretty nice. And then finally, if you have firing line, which means you have 2 teammates near you, which is often when you're doing DPS, is very easy to do, you also get a 25% bonus, but because you don't have to wait for box breathing to show up those few seconds, the DPS is really high, and then the full ammo damage is already really high, so it kind of surprised us last season with the firing line in the sand, but this is an excellent legendary options for your heavy if you want to use an exotic in a different slot. There are a couple exotics in here as well. First of all, Sleeper Simulant is on both sides of the Queenbreaker here, with and without Catalyst. The Catalyst means that you charge it faster, which is an excellent catalyst to get, although a very difficult and long, painstaking catalyst to get. An alternative to the Sleeper that I've seen these days is going to be the Queenbreaker, because of the fact that it has a pretty good DPS, pretty good full ammo damage, and also all you have to do is just put it on the long scope. That's pretty awesome. Something that actually definitely surprised me this season. I wasn't even considering it, and it seemed to be doing quite well. But to be completely honest, I need to use this as a soapbox. If you have not used Sleeper, you have to use it. People are sleeping on Sleeper because this weapon is not only have a good DPS and a good full ammo damage, it's easy to use. Literally, the reason why heavy machine guns are so far at the bottom is because they're easy to use, and the Sleeper is also easy to use. And that's why, in my opinion, oftentimes it's going to be a better option than Whisper, because landing all those headshots with Whisper is sometimes difficult to do, but with Sleeper, it just auto-targets for you. And on top of that, sometimes you get funny bounces and extra damage and kills. It's fun. And I think out of all of the different weapons in the game, no other weapon does 46,000 damage in a single shot. So I think as far as single shot weapon power outside of like the supers, it does the most damage in a single shot. And as they would say in Home Improvement, man, that's a reference that I feel no one's gonna get, but I enjoyed it. And with the main categories out of the way, I did want to do a final sweep on the top 10 that I haven't mentioned yet. First of all, 1,000 Voices, obviously the only fusion rifle in the bunch, in my opinion, is actually just a really fun and easy weapon to use, has explosion radius, and the reason why it's so far down is because it takes a long time to charge, a long time to explode, and a long time to reload, that it tanks its DPS a lot, but even then, the damage burst output is actually still pretty high. So a single just volley of this thing can do 34,000 to a single target, but often hits many targets. And again, Kali is resistant to explosions, so this actually does a lot better than the Garden of Salvation. Next up, the Leviathan's Breath is actually a decent weapon to use, pretty decent DPS and full ammo damage, but in my opinion just gets outstaged by the Sleeper because it's very similarly used, and it also gets outstaged by the Queen Breaker in both ways, so if you have the option, you might as well just use the better option. And for the second best DPS heavy in the game, Legend of Acris with the Catalyst, very important, because with the Catalyst means that you have faster reload and bigger clip size. It has a pretty impressive DPS at 27,000, kind of hitting it out of the park, trailing right behind the Whisper the Worm, which is very impressive because Whisper does not have to reload and gets huge damage bonuses from its Catalyst. And also on top of that has a respectful full ammo damage. The only issue is that fact that it's a shotgun. It cannot be used on a number of different bosses that are far away. And finally, let's talk about the final two sniper rifles. Firstly, Darcy, in my opinion, pretty much everybody has Darcy, so if you don't know what to use for DPS, you might as well use a Darcy if you don't have anything else. The important thing with this weapon is that you make sure you get your personal assistant because you do way more damage for the headshot if you have the red outline around your target. And lastly, the Whisper of the Worm, the #1 highest DPS in the game right now outside of the Super Celestial Nighthawk. This is again just to show you how good the Celestial Nighthawk is. Honestly, what is there to say about the Whisper? Firstly, it doesn't have to reload if you're always hitting white nail. Now this is not realistic. Oftentimes you're gonna have to actually miss, and that's why I have the regular version without white nail proccing listed here. Even then, the DPS, if you have to reload and then reacquire Whispered Breathing every single time, is still pretty high and pretty significant. And of course, the versions without the Catalyst is actually pretty low at 14,000. So if you don't have the Catalyst, don't use Whisper. It's honestly, it's just not worth it. But yeah, if you did end up liking these spreadsheets, make sure you check out my Patreon, linked in the description down below, because it's very important. If I don't get support from my Patreon, the spreadsheets and the 20 hours I spend a week on these spreadsheets are gonna be the first thing to go. So please, if you like what I do on the channel, if you like what I do on Discord, if you like my giveaways, you like my Twitch streams, you like my spreadsheets, take a look at the Patreon. All I'm asking is for $5 a month. And if honestly 0.01% of you gave $5 a month, I could make minimum wage, and that's honestly all I want. I also would like to play video games, which is what I'm offering, but yeah, that's it. Hope you guys did enjoy it. My name's Dychronic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.